I am a registered marriage and family therapist here in the state of Florida, soon to be a fully licensed marriage and family therapist. But I'm also a board certified sexologist, and I'm working toward becoming a certified sex therapist and educator as well. My educational background lies in psychology and gender studies, and then I got my master's in marriage, couples, and family therapy. And I decided to go that route because I actually started out as a French major in college, but then I had some college experience and trigger warning, it did involve some sexual assault. And after that, I kind of was looking into how I could facilitate my own healing from something like that. And in my Google search of how to heal from that kind of trauma, I came across the field of sex therapy. And I'd always known that I wanted to do some kind of counseling or be some kind of helping professional. I just didn't really know what kind. But once I came across that, it kind of clicked for me like, okay, I could heal myself through this, but I could also maybe use this as a way to help heal other people. So from there, I switched my major from French to psychology, and then I kind of streamlined my experience toward becoming a sex therapist from there.
Wow. You know, I always say when someone can take something that was traumatic or painful and turn that into a gift
Mhm.
for themselves and the world, that is one of, I think, the greatest ways to handle an experience like that.
Yeah, yeah, and I appreciate you saying that because I really felt like, you know what, I can use this. It doesn't have to be all, like doom and gloom because of it. It's not that you like must use your trauma for some greater good, but I'm glad that I was able to take it here.
And out of curiosity, in your experiences with sex therapy in your own way, did you find it to be healing and beneficial? And if so, what is it about sex therapy that you found was really healing for you?
I think one of the biggest things was knowing that there was a kind of therapy out there or a kind of help that was just for people to, number one, talk about sex in a safe way or have a safe space to talk about it because it's so taboo in our culture. But also that it gave me the like confidence to explore what sex meant for me and what sexual wellness means for me. And I learned so many things through my own journey with sex therapy that I didn't get in sex education classes in school. So sex therapy in and of itself is just very empowering in that way. And I think I've seen quite a few of my clients take that same kind of I guess just take away from it, just the empowerment piece. So yeah, the empowerment piece of it, the confidence that it gives you, and the safe space to talk about something that is so taboo, yet is literally the reason why any of us are here. So
It's really interesting you say that. At Live Jasmine, what I found after interviewing hundreds of the Jasmine members is
mhm,
exactly what you said. This piece of it's a place where they're allowed to talk about sex, they're allowed to talk about their fantasies, their desires, or just that permission to
yeah,
talk about sex. It makes that's one of the greatest draws to the
mhm,
platform.
exactly.
And it's interesting too, because so many members, they find this connection with a model that they'll
Mhm,
see for many years. The longest relationship I've interviewed someone about, he's been seeing the same model for 18 years, I guess 19
mhm.
now, because I interviewed,
Wow,
yeah.
I believe that. Yeah.
So, you know, these long relationships, and then it's like once you have that permission to just go
Mhm.
there and you've gone there, then the conversation almost does evolve at some point into
Exactly.
other things.
Exactly, exactly. Because it's a safe place to just put all these things down. And funny that you say that. So another part of my background is in sex work. I've done both full service and not as much camming work, but a little bit of camming work as well. And I found that there are quite a few parallels between sex work and therapy. So, yeah, so funny that you say that. Like a lot of people do think of their dates or like their time with that model as a safe space or a place to like put certain things down. I've had dates where we're just talking about things. It's just a safe space for a lot of people that they might not get elsewhere. So yeah, quite a few parallels.
I have heard that from many models, cam
Mhm.
models, that they feel like therapists. And
Exactly.
I've had many members tell me that it's their form of therapy, meditation, it's their form of stress relief. Because a it may be a stigma, but it is no secret that most, hetero men do not
Mhm.
want to willingly go to therapy.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm curious though, is that still the truth? Like, have you seen that to be true even in
It's
your, yeah.
it's definitely changing.
Oh,
Definitely
is
starting to,
it?
yeah, yep, it's changing. I'm starting to see a lot more, especially cis het men, a lot more are starting to come into my office. I will say that I still have more women, but it's definitely changing. I was actually thinking about that today. So funny you say that. Yeah,
Really?
yeah, slowly but
Wow.
surely.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
Hmm.
That means that that narrative is changing as it should, because
Yeah.
the bottom line is we all need support. And I see therapy as one avenue of support. What was something maybe surprising, maybe not surprising, but something that stood out to you that you learned while you were doing sex work?
Hmm.
That's the first question. And then I'll
Hmm.
also ask, what's something that's surprising that you've learned about human sexuality since you've been a counselor?
Okay. So something that was surprising for me while I was doing sex work, probably how comfortable I was just doing it, because of course we have such a stigma built up around it, and we're made to think that sex workers like look a certain way, or like they are like only in a certain like area, or that they're like inherently evil or inherently dirty because of the kind of work that they do. And the first time I did it, I thought that I would have all those things just like swimming around in my head, like, and that it would stop me from doing it. But I think I settled into it pretty comfortably. Now, that's not the case for all sex workers, obviously. I don't want anyone thinking that that is like a blanket experience or statement. I think I was able to go into sex work from a very privileged standpoint. I will say that. But that was something that was surprising for me, was like how comfortable I felt doing it. And then on top of that, how, like we just talked about, a lot of the motivation for clients wasn't always just sex based. It was about like having that connection with someone, or being able to delve into certain kinks or fantasies that they couldn't with their partner, or whatever the case may be. It was that level of comfort that they like kept coming back for. That was something that was interesting for me. Now, something that was interesting about human sexuality in general, probably that I guess more people than would want to admit, like just don't know what they're doing when it comes to um like knowing their body, or like having an orgasm, or just like knowing what to do, period, because like we weren't taught any of these things. So it's just interesting, like how many questions people really do have that they're afraid to ask, until they like ask one tiny question, and then like the floodgates open. So it's just interesting, like how many people don't have the information but want it, but are just like afraid to talk about it, or afraid to ask because they don't really have any place to do it. And it's cool, like the clients who I'll get for an issue that's not related to sex at all, but it will come up like in a very small way, and then that ends up being like multiple sessions after that, because they finally have a place to talk about it.
That's really interesting. I think too, again, because we're not given this information about
Mhm.
what our sexualities really are, how interconnected they are to everything, that we don't even realize how much that part of ourselves is playing a role in so many other areas. It could
Yeah.
be our confidence, our
Mhm.
relationships, our
Mhm.
connections, like our fulfillment in life. I mean, it really
Right.
can play a huge role in many different areas.
Mhm. I've actually had at least one or two clients that have brought up something like some part of their sexuality that they felt shame for. And then we get to talking about it and we start to normalize it a little bit. And then they take that like piece of validation home with them and that allows them to just feel a little bit more comfortable in themselves. And then that comfort can kind of like bleed into other areas of their lives, just like well, now I've heard people say, okay, well, now I just feel a little bit more comfortable just being myself, period. Like I'm not worried about other people like judging me for anything. And it doesn't always like go from like 0 to 60 like that quick, but like maybe over a couple of sessions or a couple of weeks, they're like, you know what, I do feel a little bit better. I do feel a little bit less like anxious about things because we had that conversation.
That is really interesting to me.
Yeah, it bleeds into a lot of areas.
Sometimes I'll ask the model, a Jasmine model, like, what does she think the member is actually there for? And many of them have told me that they feel that members are there to be seen or heard.
Mhm. I can see that.
And I'm like, in what way? And they'll tell me, sometimes they'll just share something that is a little, maybe out there or just something that is so private or something like that. And they just feel so much relief from that and joy from that. Just
Mhm.
getting it out there to someone where they know it's safe, though. They know the model doesn't know anyone they know, can't tell
Right.
anyone they know, wouldn't tell them anyone they know. So it's a
Right.
safe place to get it out. And then when you say, oh, you've had clients who have said, wow, once I talked about that, it's almost like a weight is off their shoulders. Do we need to be
Exactly.
talking about sex or something?
Right. See, exactly. I also think the idea that they're not going to be judged when they bring up those things, that contributes to that idea of like, okay, it is safe. Like I can say this and there aren't going to be any repercussions. Like no one's going to be coming after me or judging me or anything like that. I think that definitely helps as well.
Mhm. Yeah, the lack of and I've asked Jasmine models, what is your job as a model? And they say to not judge. That's their job.
Mhm.
And I bet that in your job now and seeing clients, you might feel similarly.
Definitely. That's actually like one of the major tenets of providing therapy is to come at your clients from a place of non-judgment, of complete acceptance, and just of, you know, letting them know that it's okay for them to be who they are with you. So it definitely makes sense.
It's beautiful. What role do you see sex tech and AI playing in therapy, people's sex lives?
I do think we're just getting started. I think it's going to be probably the Wild West for some time with it. I can say on the therapy side, I have dabbled just with like Chat GPT for maybe helping me design like worksheets for clients or just like resources or handouts, that kind of thing. Of course, with like proofreading it and making sure that everything is like accurate. And sometimes even like helping with like planning sessions or like session guides, that kind of a thing. So I've seen it be really helpful on that front. As far as like sex tech and I think it could get pretty interesting, especially with like maybe like toys that like read our body cues or something like that. Or I know that there's like a little bit of sex work in, I guess, like the metaverse or whatever you want to call it. As far as like strip clubs, I know that that's already kind of a thing. So the implications with that, I think, could be pretty crazy, especially if someone were to actually develop a way for people to engage in sex work through an AI world. I don't know how that would work, but I'm sure it's not impossible. So that could be pretty crazy, to be honest. I do vaguely remember hearing something about a sexual assault taking place in the metaverse as well, though. And I don't know if that's necessarily directly linked to like AI or whatever, but I know that it's something that did happen. So that's an implication as well. So I do think, yeah, it would be interesting to see where it goes, but we're definitely just getting started. There is such a thing called surrogate therapy, and
Yeah.
that is it's kind of like a somatic or it's not just somatic. It can go to a somatic type of therapy, meaning more like hands-on with the client. Surrogates are practitioners who do more of the like practical work with the client. So maybe helping them with like how to date or like how to approach people in real life when dating, how sometimes how to cuddle, sometimes how to touch their partner, and sometimes it can go to actual intercourse with the client. So that wouldn't be my expertise because I'm trained in more the talk therapy, but there are actual practitioners or surrogate workers, surrogate therapists. I'm not sure if they call themselves surrogate therapists, but it's like a um, kind of a therapy, like or a supplement to the sex therapy to have the surrogate come in and do that work with the client actually in person. So if we were able to do that in kind of like a VR kind of the setting with like a specific model who they like, come up with some kind of program where they just put the goggles on and have the model in front of them, I think that could be a really great way to help clients. I can't think of too many like I guess, negatives or drawbacks about that right now. I'm sure there would have to be quite a few waivers and maybe things to obviously protect the model and make sure that, the model is only so accessible and that the client can't get any information on them or anything like that. But I think that would be a pretty good way to integrate the two.
If you could give one message to everyone in the world
Mhm.
about human sexuality that you think is really needed now, what would that
Mhm.
message be?
That you're not weird for wanting sexual connection in the way that's most authentic to you, as long as you're not hurting anyone else or yourself without your own consent. Um, but I do think that there are a lot of taboos in our society that where people are made to feel like weird or other or just like an outcast because of what their sexual desires are. And I wish that we lived in a world where we didn't perpetuate that. So you're not weird for being into that one thing. There are plenty of people that are into it as well. And you deserve a safe space to talk about that.
I love that. Yeah, I really do think that that is what people are so hungry for. Speaking from my own experience, knowing when I'm in a place where I'm not going to be judged and I can
Mhm.
really just say what I'm feeling or thinking or whatever the case is,
Mhm.
there's almost nothing better, really.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so to have more places where people can just fully be themselves, talk about whatever it is that they're wanting to share, I think it would be really beneficial to people. And I think it would help because I personally think part of the problem with a lot of people
Mhm.
is the repression of their sexuality. That's
Exactly.
when we're starting to see like issues pop
Hmm.
up. But if they
Hmm.
can
Let
get
it
things
out.
out, it would be
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. It's like when we're growing up and we have like our primary caretaker, whether it's our mother or grandmother, father, whoever, we as kids need to know that we're going to be safe with that caretaker. We need to know that like we can express ourselves with that caretaker and we're only going to get like a safe, nurturing space back. And it's the same thing with pretty much anything else that makes us vulnerable in our lives. Like we need to know that we can have somewhere to let these things out, and just be vulnerable with who we are, especially with our sexual desires. And sometimes it's with a partner, sometimes it's with a cam model, sometimes it's with a therapist. But I think that everyone deserves to have that space when it comes to sexuality.
Yeah, really well said.
Thanks.
What are some of the main misconceptions about sex that you see in our culture?
That we are all supposedly born just like knowing or supposedly supposed to know how to do it, that we don't need any kind of guidance or education about the practical act of having sex or trying these different sexual like moves, different positions, all the things. I feel like there's this misconception that we're all supposed to just know, but it's not like that, obviously. Most people learn sex by trial and error or by watching porn, which is fine. But I do think sometimes people Especially a lot of cishet men might take the wrong message from porn and actually try to apply those things in real life, but they don't really get the difference between real life sex and a contrived scene for your entertainment. Um, so yeah, the education piece is really lacking. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions is that we're all supposed to just know how to do it. I will also say, I don't think it's the porn that's the problem. Porn is not the problem. Porn, like no one ever said that porn was here to educate us. Porn is there for entertainment. We just so happen to use it for educational purposes sometimes because we don't really have a lot else. Now, the pros and cons of porn being in that position, of course, we can garner some information from it. It is entertaining. It is fun to watch. It can be a really great addition to like our sex routines, whatever the case may be. But I think the cons of porn being in that position is the fact that porn exists in our society, like a society that does not teach us about sex, that does not want us to talk about sex, and that does not like make room for the distinction between sex in porn and sex in real life because we don't talk about sex in real life. Any like depiction of sex that we see in our media, it's always like picture perfect or just like perfectly messy. It's all like super contrived, or it's like what we see in porn, which is these really like specific scenes that more than likely aren't happening in our lives because again it's contrived, it's entertainment. So I think those are the cons when it comes to it. And then on top of that, like the fact that again like our society is not set up for us to be able to freely talk about sex and what it actually looks like in real life. Most of the sex education that we get in at least in our country, it usually focuses on like abstinence, STI prevention, contraceptives, fine, but it's not getting into like what sex actually looks like or what it actually feels like, or talking about sex in the context of pleasure and connection versus just like making a baby and when a man and a woman love each other. So because we don't have a lot of resources, practical resources for what sex actually is, of course people are going to go to porn. And of course people are going to think like what they're seeing is what they're supposed to be enacting in real life. And that sucks because no one's really telling anybody any different until they actually get to the point where they're having sex with someone and they're trying to do all this rough shit and trying to choke somebody out of nowhere. And they're being told, wait a minute, I'm not into that. Well, no one ever told them that they might have that kind of reaction. You don't see what's happening behind the scenes of porn. You don't see like the setup and everything of it and the fact that it's super contrived and the conversations about consent and the conversations about boundaries during what's going to happen in the scene, what's not going to happen in the scene. A lot of people see the scene and they think, oh, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. And that's what she's going to do to her. That's what they're going to do to. That's what he's going to do to her, whatever the case may be. And again, that is that trial and error piece that goes into just learning about sex, period, in our society. I think there needs to be more of a conversation about the distinction between real sex and sex that's happening in porn and letting people know like number one, it's okay if this is not what you're into. It's okay if what is shown in the most popular porns is not what you're into. It's okay if you're having I guess more vanilla sex and not doing all the kinky shit. And it's also okay to have these conversations about what the distinction is going to be.
It's so true. Like you said, it's made for enjoyment and fun.
Yeah.
It's not really made for education, but like you said, because we're not properly educating
Mhm.
about sexuality, that's, what a lot of people turn to because it's a free resource, really.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
That is, though, where I see surrogates or cam models helping people who have
Hmm.
had a lot of experience or trial or error with
Hmm.
other human beings and teaching them and that's something a lot of models will say they do is they'll teach the member how to properly interact or they'll pretend like they were on a date or something.
Right. Yeah.
Because yeah, we're not like we learn through trial and error or some way that may or may not be a legitimate way or source.
Exactly. Yeah. And there are more resources popping up recently that offer just like practical how-to videos for different like scenarios or positions or whatever. But those things are kind of scarce in our society and not that many people know about them. Like these are kind of like more new resources. So like while it is changing, for the most part, we're still catching up to that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Is there anything about your work, human connection, human sexuality, that we didn't touch on or talk about, but you want to share?
I guess just, oh, we might have touched on this, but something that's sticking out to me is just the parallels that I found between sex work and being a therapist. Like, just the fact that both things have taught me that most people just want to be seen and heard in a safe space. Most people have some kind of sexual kink or sexual interest, I won't even say kink, that they've been made to feel shameful about, that they really don't need to because they just don't know that a lot of people are into it as well. And sometimes that conversation that they have with you as a sex therapist, as a sex worker or a therapist, might be the first time that they get to have that conversation. So that's always interesting to me. Um, and the fact that most people just want like some kind of human connection, period. Like we are social beings. I think we're in this generation or this mindset that like we're not supposed to need anyone or like not supposed to want connection with anyone, and it's such BS because we're social beings. We unfortunately have been socialized and developed to need each other and need connection, and most people want that on some level. So some people, again, some people get it from a therapist, some people get it from a sex worker, some people get it from a partner or a friend or whatever the case may be. But most people do want that.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. I would say technology, I'm not going to say technology is to blame. It's not, because it's how we use things, but because we can live and
Mhm,
survive independently now,
mhm.
we think we should. But,
Exactly.
because now it's like I can press a button and have food delivered. I actually
Yeah.
don't go hunt in the wilderness anymore where I would need someone to do that for me or help me with it or whatever the case
Mhm,
is. I can
mhm.
press a button. And so it's easier to be on our own just in living and surviving. But psychologically, physiologically, I don't think that our nervous systems we have not adapted or evolved to that level, actually.
Right.
We still need each other to feel
Exactly.
safe and connected. So, my
Agreed.
final question for you is, what do you think our next steps are collectively or individually to build a more sex positive or just sexually healthy society?
Mm. I think the next step is to, I guess, keep having conversations like this and keep putting resources out like this so that people know that they're not alone in having these conversations, that they're not weird for wanting that connection, especially with a sex worker, and that there is some place for people to be their most authentic selves. And I think the more that we keep talking about sex in these open spaces and having these conversations and perpetuating that idea, I think that will help to dismantle a lot of the shame and guilt that we as a society are made to feel about sex. And hopefully that will continue to garner a more sex positive society for us.
Hopefully.
Mhm.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.